kind of puzzled when both sides of the family were kept away from the royal wedding, and we started wondering, what's up with this?
The Markle family has just broken their silence, and it is hitting the Sussex camp right where it hurts. Thomas Markle Sr. and Samantha Markle have dropped a massive announcement, following a wave of new, unanswered questions surrounding Lilibet Diana. This isn't just another round of standard family bickering in the tabloids. It is a direct assault on the exact story Meghan has sold to the world. With global skepticism mounting over the birth timeline and digital paper trails, the Markles claim they have the proof to flip the script on the California royals. The battle lines are officially drawn. The unexpected press conference in Mexico. A fleet of unmarked media vans pulled up outside a modest residential villa in Rosarito on a crisp morning. White dust kicked up from the gravel driveway as camera operators dragged heavy tripods toward a small garage entrance. This was a low-key neighborhood located just across the California border. There were no sleek podiums, velvet curtains, or professional public relations handlers managing the gate. Microphones from various global networks were simply taped flat to a plastic folding table. Thomas Markle Sr. sat behind it, his hands shaking slightly as he adjusted a pair of reading glasses. He wore a plain button-down shirt. His attorney sat immediately to his left, opening thick leather folders packed with certified legal documents. A live video feed popped onto news desks in Los Angeles and London simultaneously. The broadcast began without a single second of warning to the public. The Sussex camp was caught completely flat-footed by this sudden transmission. Their multi-million-dollar publicity engine in Montecito had absolutely no time to draft a statement or issue a preemptive legal injunction. For a long time, the public believed the Markle family was entirely out of options. Media commentators had spent years dismissing them as bitter relatives shouting from the sidelines. That narrative evaporated the moment the cameras focused on the table. This was not a desperate plea for attention from an estranged father. It was a precise, legally backed assault on the core history of the California royals. Thomas Sr. leaned closer to the microphone. He did not look at a script. He spoke directly to the journalists crowding into the small room. He announced that his legal team had successfully obtained a certified medical record copy from a private clinic. This document, he claimed, directly contradicts the official public birth timeline of Lilibet Diana. The room went entirely silent, except for the frantic clicking of camera shutters. Reporters instantly began typing updates on their phones. The question of funding for this massive media event was answered within minutes. Organizing a synchronized global broadcast with top-tier journalists requires immense capital and coordination. Rumors quickly circulated that a rival faction within the British aristocracy was pulling the strings. The truth was far more concrete. An independent international documentary crew had been living with the family for the past 6 months. They completely financed the broadcast as part of a massive investigative project. Every claim made during this briefing had been thoroughly vetted by high-level legal teams before the cameras turned on. Meghan Markle's publicists could not simply dismiss the allegations as unverified family gossip. Thomas Sr. held up a piece of paper bearing an official state seal. The public had been led to believe a very specific story about the quiet arrival of the child in a pristine Santa Barbara hospital. This new document suggested the official story was structurally flawed from the very beginning. The legal paperwork specifically targeted the timeline of events surrounding the hospital registration. Thomas Sr. pointed to a certified stamp on the medical file that noted a completely different hour of admission than what was listed in the official Archewell press release. Journalists leaned forward to inspect the digital copies being distributed by the legal assistants. This was the first time an actual piece of clinical documentation had been introduced to challenge the public story. The precision of the data left no room for immediate denials from the California PR teams. Phone lines between New York and the West Coast jammed instantly as top-tier publicists tried to figure out how the lawyers had gained access to restricted medical files. The Duke and Duchess had spent years building a fortress of absolute privacy around their children. They used non-disclosure agreements and heavy security to keep every personal detail hidden. An elderly man sitting in a house in Mexico had just breached that perimeter with a single legal filing. Thomas Sr. spoke with a raw emotion that immediately resonated with viewers watching the live stream. he detailed the intense psychological toll of being completely excluded from his granddaughter's life. He explained that he had tried every traditional, private channel to seek a peaceful resolution before turning to the press. He asked why a couple that constantly preaches about global compassion could not find a single shred of it for their own family. The drama of this press conference began to completely overshadow the couple's ongoing commercial campaigns. Meghan's team had been preparing for a massive global rollout of her new lifestyle brand in 2026. That enterprise relied entirely on an image of warmth, community, and organic domestic happiness. The image of her erring father publicly pleading for the right to see his grandchild completely shattered that aesthetic. The contrast was too stark for the public to ignore. On one side was a corporate enterprise built on empathy, and on the other was a broken family reality. Thomas Sr.'s lead attorney took the microphone to deliver a final warning to the Sussex legal representatives. He stated that the documents revealed during the briefing were merely the first phase of a coordinated legal strategy. They were fully prepared to enter these certified medical records into the public court record if Meghan's team attempted to block their upcoming legal moves. The defensive wall around the Lilibet narrative was no longer just showing cracks, it was facing a total collapse under the weight of undeniable public records. The attorney detailed how they plan to leverage these documents in upcoming civil hearings. He explained that a formal subpoena would be issued to the medical staff who were on duty during the days listed in the new file. This meant that nurses, administrative clerks, and security guards at the California facility would face mandatory depositions under penalty of perjury. The legal strategy was designed to peel back every layer of corporate privacy the Sussexes had used to protect their narrative. Journalists inside the villa scrambled to file their breaking news stories as the live broadcast concluded. The narrative had completely shifted in a matter of minutes, leaving the Archewell PR team trapped in a desperate defensive posture. They were no longer fighting vague rumors or anonymous palace leaks. They were now facing a highly organized, legally backed assault from inside their own bloodline. The California dream was rapidly transforming into a public relations nightmare, and the Markle family was just getting started. The immediate fallout hit the international stock markets where the couple's primary media partners were traded. Shares in the major streaming platforms that carried their content saw a sudden drop in afternoon trading as investors reacted to the threat of a massive legal scandal. Corporate executives began making frantic calls to the Montecito estate, demanding to know if the medical records Thomas Sr. held were authentic. The business community was starting to realize that the Sussex brand was becoming a significant liability, entangled in a never-ending cycle of family litigation and public controversy. Back inside the Rosarito Villa, Thomas Sr.'s team began packing up the physical evidence into secure steel cases. They had accomplished exactly what they set out to do. They had broken through the multi-million-dollar wall of silence and forced the world to look at the hard, cold facts of the case. The journalists left the property in a hurry, eager to broadcast the footage to millions of waiting viewers. The first major blow had been landed, and the legal paper trail was now driving the global royal narrative. Samantha Markle unlocks the family. Photo archive. A bulky external hard drive sat on a desk in a quiet apartment. Samantha Markle clicked a mouse, opening a folder labeled 1995. Hundreds of digital files flooded the screen. These were high-resolution scans of original film negatives. There were also PDFs of childhood report cards and handwritten graduation cards. For years, global media platforms accepted a very specific story about the Duchess. The public heard about a lonely childhood spent entirely in isolation. This hidden archive told a completely different story. Samantha leaned forward to upload the first batch of files to an international news syndicate. The digital trail was about to challenge the Sussex public narrative on a global scale. The release of these specific documents was timed perfectly with an upcoming legal deadline. Meghan's attorneys had spent months trying to dismiss Samantha's ongoing civil lawsuit in Florida. They argued that the family's claims of misrepresentation were completely baseless. They wanted the public to see the Markles as an irrelevant footnote in a royal romance. That strategy collapsed as the first set of images hit the internet. The photos showed a warm, active family dynamic. The world was suddenly looking at a reality that did not match the Netflix documentary series. One specific photograph from 2003 caught the attention of investigative journalists immediately. It showed Meghan smiling warmly alongside her father at a graduation dinner. Thomas Sr. had financed her entire private education, from elementary school through Northwestern University in Evanston. The archive contained the actual tuition receipts and bank transfer slips. These papers bore the official stamps of the financial institutions. They proved that her upbringing was highly privileged and heavily supported by her paternal family. The narrative of a self-made woman who had no help was explicitly contradicted by the physical evidence. This massive dump of personal data served a broader purpose. Samantha was using the childhood archive to establish a pattern of behavior. She explained to reporters that if a person is willing to alter the facts of their own upbringing, they might be willing to alter other timelines too. The family was using these old records to create widespread doubt about the recent Lilibet stories. They wanted the public to look at the current California life through a lens of extreme skepticism. The strategy was working, as media commentators began analyzing the gaps between the official PR statements and these raw family documents. The legal reality behind this archive was incredibly serious. Samantha's lawyers were preparing to submit the entire digital folder as formal evidence for an upcoming deposition. This move placed Meghan's high-priced corporate attorneys in a dangerous position. If they denied the authenticity of the photographs, they would be lying to a judge. If they admitted the files were real, they would be confirming that the public had been misled about the Markle family for years. The legal team in Los Angeles spent the afternoon in emergency meetings, trying to find a way to block the submission. Inside the gated walls of the Montecito estate, the digital leak triggered an immediate crisis. Crisis managers at Archewell attempted to issue copyright strikes to any media platform hosting the images. They claimed the photos were private property. The internet moved far too fast for the lawyers to contain the damage. Within hours, the leaked letters were being shared by thousands of users on social media. The global audience was reading Meghan's own handwritten words from her teenage years, where she praised her father as her ultimate hero. The curated image of a modern, independent royal was being overshadowed by her own historical handwriting. Prince Harry found himself in an incredibly difficult position as the family history flooded the news feeds. He had spent years operating under a specific version of his wife's past. That narrative had fueled his protective instincts and driven his hostility toward the press. Now, looking at the absolute clarity of the old family photos, the situation looked far more complicated. He was looking at a father-in-law who had clearly invested immense love and resources into his daughter. Yet, that same man was now completely isolated, being treated like an enemy of the state. The realization caused visible tension within the private quarters of the mansion. Samantha quickly followed up the photo leak with a live television interview from her home. She spoke calmly, avoiding emotional outbursts. She stated that the family had remained quiet for a long time to let Meghan enjoy her royal status. But watching their father's character be repeatedly attacked on global television had broken their patience. She explained that the photo archive was a defensive measure to restore their father's dignity before his health failed completely. It was a clear warning to the Sussex PR team that a multi-million-dollar budget could not erase physical history. The commercial impact of this archive was felt immediately across North America. Major entertainment executives who had partnered with the Sussexes were growing deeply fatigued by the constant family warfare. They realized they had not bought into a smooth, inspiring royal legacy. Instead, they were hitched to a never-ending family dispute that regularly disrupted their marketing campaigns. Corporate sponsors began delaying meetings for upcoming lifestyle product launches. The global audience was losing interest in the couple's wellness messages, preferring to watch the unfolding drama of the Markle family archive. As the day ended, Samantha's legal team formally handed over the unredacted files to the court clerk. The move made the entire childhood history a matter of permanent public record. Anyone could now access the original letters and financial documents. The fortress of privacy that had been built around the Duchess was being dismantled brick by the very people she grew up with. The physical evidence was now locked in a government vault, and a much bigger question about the current royal timeline was about to emerge. The question that made Montecito go silent. A printout of an email lay on the long glass conference table inside a media office. The sender was a prominent investigative editor from a major news syndicate based in Washington. The text consisted of 5 numbered questions regarding the birth registration of the Sussex's daughter. Archwell publicists gathered around the paper in the total silence. They had spent years managing lifestyle launches and charity announcements. This message was different. It did not ask about clothing brands or philanthropic donations. It demanded verifiable, historic facts about a child in the line of succession to the British throne. The deadline for the response was set for 5 o'clock that evening. The immediate reaction was an overnight modification to the couple's digital platforms. A section of the website previously detailed their views on family heritage and ancestral connections. Visitors clicking that link the next morning were automatically redirected to a generic corporate landing page. This sudden digital adjustment caught the attention of internet researchers immediately. The public relations team had chosen to completely erase the content rather than answer the journalist's query. This defensive move proved that the press had finally found a vulnerability in the official narrative. The editor's primary question focused on the specific medical professionals present in the delivery room on June 4, 2021. In the United Kingdom, royal births follow a strict constitutional protocol. Independent medical officers must witness the birth and sign official state certificates. This process ensures absolute clarity for the line of succession. It removes any potential for public doubt or legal challenges. The Sussexes had chosen to bypass the traditional royal medical team entirely. They selected an independent private clinic in California instead, away from institutional oversight. The investigative reporter had cross-referenced the initial California birth registry with active medical licensing boards. They discovered that the primary doctor listed on the internal filing had quietly closed her practice just months after the delivery. Her name disappeared from the active clinic roster without any public explanation. The news syndicate wanted to know the exact identity and current professional status of the secondary witnesses who signed the hospital log. This inquiry placed the Montecito team in a difficult position. Revealing the names would expose private citizens to international legal depositions by the Markle lawyers. Refusing to name them would create a massive wave of global media skepticism. The pressure inside the estate altered daily operations immediately. Security personnel began a complete audit of all household employees. Staff members were required to hand over their personal mobile devices to verify that no internal medical logs or scheduling documents were being leaked to external sources. New non-disclosure agreements were issued with severe financial penalties for any breach of privacy. The relaxed, organic lifestyle image projected in their promotional videos was replaced by an intense corporate lockdown. Employees operated under constant surveillance as the management scrambled to contain the inquiry. Harry's frustration grew as he realized the family history was driving the global news cycle. He had left his home country to escape the constant scrutiny of the British press. He had been promised that the legal system in North America would provide a bulletproof shield for his private life. Now, he was discovering that freedom of information, requests, and civil court procedures were far more invasive than anything he had faced in Europe. His daughter's birth records were being treated as public interest documents by constitutional lawyers across the Atlantic. The timing of this media crisis severely disrupted their commercial plans. Meghan's brand advisors had been scheduling a series of high-profile television appearances to promote her new organic products. Television networks refused to accept the standard list of pre-approved talking points. Executive producers stated that any broadcast interview must include an open discussion about the Markle family's legal claims. The global media was no longer interested in rehearsed statements about wellness and community. They wanted answers regarding the certified medical timeline and the missing witness logs. The publicists remained trapped in a defensive posture as the afternoon deadline approached. Issuing a standard denial would only encourage the news syndicate to publish their findings immediately. Remaining completely silent was being interpreted by the public as a confirmation that the official story had major discrepancies. The global audience, which had previously shown great empathy for the couple's desire for independence, was growing increasingly cynical. The contrast between their public speeches on transparency and their private legal battles was becoming impossible for commentators to ignore. The lead publicist finally walked back into the conference room as the clock struck 4. The legal team had failed to secure a judicial injunction to block the upcoming article. The Washington editors had confirmed they were moving forward with the publication, utilizing public licensing records to highlight the gaps in the timeline. The fortress of privacy was buckling under the weight of a single, fact-based investigation. The story was about to hit newsstands globally, and the Markle family was already preparing their next legal motion in an open courtroom. Thomas Markle's final legal demand to the Sussexes. A courier envelope containing a thick stack of court-stamped documents landed heavily on a desk at a law firm in San Francisco. The papers bore the official emblem of the California Superior Court system. This was a formal legal petition filed on behalf of Thomas Sr. His attorneys had spent weeks studying the state family code to find a structural opening in the Sussex defense. They did not sue for financial compensation or generic damages. Instead, the legal team utilized a highly specific statutory framework to target the couple's absolute control over their private life. The legal action was brought under California's grandfamilies legislation, which permits biological grandparents to petition for visitation rights under strict parameters. To make a viable case, the petitioning party must demonstrate that the absolute isolation of the child is actively causing a rupture in their understanding of their personal heritage. The filing asserted that the total severance of ties with both sides of the maternal line was driven by personal grievances rather than the true welfare of the minor child. The move was a direct challenge to the domestic wall built around the family. The most critical element of the petition involved the mandatory discovery phase of the legal process. To establish absolute biological jurisdiction, a family court judge requires the formal entry of the child's foundational records into the legal file. This process automatically demands the submission of original birth certificates, verified hospital discharge summaries, and the original medical attendance logs. The Markle lawyers had effectively turned the state legal system into an investigative tool. The Sussexes were suddenly facing a choice between settling the dispute privately or allowing their most guarded medical timelines to become part of a public court record. The filing immediately triggered an intense debate among the couple's legal advisors in New York City. One faction argued for an immediate, quiet financial settlement and a private arrangement to prevent a prolonged public courtroom battle. They pointed out that a highly publicized lawsuit over grandparents' rights would permanently damage Meghan's ongoing lifestyle commerce. The public image of a daughter using a team of corporate lawyers to bar an erring elderly man from seeing his grandchild would alienate mainstream consumers. The commercial enterprise was built entirely on themes of community and empathy, which directly clashed with a bitter family lawsuit. A separate group of advisors demanded total, unyielding resistance to the court summons. They argued that accepting a compromise would set a highly dangerous precedent for the estate's security. It would demonstrate that estranged relatives could use the local court system to breach their perimeter and force personal meetings. They began drafting an immediate motion to dismiss the petition, planning to argue that Thomas Sr. had never established a physical relationship with the child since her birth, which invalidated his claims under the statute. This counter-strategy, however, carried an immense risk of backfiring during public hearings. To prove that no relationship existed, the Sussex legal team would be required to submit detailed logs of their security protocols, communication blocks, and specific isolation measures implemented at the estate. They would have to explain under oath exactly why they blocked every private letter and gift sent by the grandfather over the years. This testimony would expose their daily household operations to intense scrutiny by journalists who regularly monitor court dockets. The defense strategy was forcing them to detail the very machinery of isolation they had denied using in public interviews. Harry found himself in an incredibly vulnerable position as the legal deadline approached. He had spent his entire youth in a country where royal family disputes were managed by private counsels and sovereign immunity protocols. He was completely unfamiliar with the raw, adversarial nature of American civil litigation. Now, his daughter's name and birth history were being treated as legal leverage in a local court dispute. He reportedly voiced deep concerns to his immediate staff that their constant reliance on aggressive legal shields was permanently trapping his children in an artificial environment, cut off from any genuine family connections on both sides of the ocean. International legal analysts began analyzing the public filings as news of the petition leaked to major syndicates. Radio and television programs were filled with debates on whether a California judge would grant visitation rights to an estranged relative living across the border. The public paper trail had successfully caught up with the polished imagery of the California lifestyle brand. The Markle family had elevated the conflict from a standard tabloid dispute into a formal courtroom battle that threatened to permanently expose the private history of the Montecito household. The document itself, was over 80 pages long. It detailed every attempt Thomas Sr. had made to send birthday cards and letters to the estate since 2021. Each item was logged with a corresponding United States Postal Service tracking number and proof of delivery confirmation. The paperwork showed that the letters were consistently signed for by Archewell security personnel, but never forwarded to the main house. This meticulous record-keeping was designed to counter the argument that the grandfather had simply given up or lacked genuine interest in the child's life. The legal team representing the Markles also included a specific demand for an independent psychological evaluation of the minor child. They argued that a court-appointed child psychologist should assess whether the complete erasure of the maternal family was impacting the child's emotional development. This specific request was a massive strategic blow to the Sussexes. It meant that a third-party evaluator would gain direct, unhindered access to the private residence, bypassing the heavy security gates and non-disclosure barriers that protected the family's daily routines. Meghan's public relations coordinators attempted to launch a counteroffensive in the media, pitching stories to friendly lifestyle journalists about the importance of protecting children from toxic family dynamics. The media landscape, however, had fundamentally shifted. Outlets were no longer willing to run generic statements without pressing for concrete updates on the court summons. Legal reporters stood outside the courthouse daily, waiting for the Sussex legal team to submit their initial motion. The story had transitioned from a standard entertainment gossip column into a high-stakes statutory battle that was being tracked by legal scholars across the country. The economic reality of the situation began to weigh heavily on the Archewell board members. The cost of maintaining a multi-jurisdictional legal defense against multiple family members was draining resources that were originally allocated for television production and content creation. They were spending millions of dollars on elite trial attorneys in California and Florida, simply to keep their own public records sealed. The corporate sponsors who had signed overall deals were expressing concern that the constant litigation was overshadowing the commercial products they were trying to market to global consumers. Harry's childhood friends in London were also keeping a close eye on the proceedings, with several quietly reaching out through secure messaging apps to offer their perspectives. They reminded him that the royal family had faced similar media sieges in the past, but had always relied on institutional dignity and silence to weather the storm. The aggressive, litigious nature of the American strategy was only drawing more attention to the very documents they wanted to protect. The contrast between the two approaches was creating a profound sense of cultural dislocation for the prince, who felt increasingly out of place within the fast-paced, adversarial U.S. legal system. The tension reached a climax during an afternoon conference call between the couple and their senior trial lawyers. The attorneys made it clear that a standard motion to dismiss would likely be rejected by the presiding judge, who was known for prioritizing grandparental visitation access in high-profile custody disputes. The court was leaning toward ordering an evidentiary hearing, which would require both Harry and Meghan to appear in person to answer questions about the birth logs and communication blocks under oath. The prospect of a public deposition was the ultimate nightmare for a brand built entirely on curated privacy, and the clock was ticking down to the final filing deadline. The ultimate exposure of the California dream. The high-stakes legal gamble between the Markle family and the Sussex legal team had finally crossed a point of no return. A former production technician, who had worked closely with the independent documentary crew in Rosarito, stepped into the offices of a prominent legal publication. He handed over an unredacted audio file recorded during the chaotic aftermath of the initial Mexican press conference. The digital file did not contain vague theories or third-party gossip. It featured the actual raw voices of senior public relations managers coordinating an emergency response strategy for Archewell. The recording captured an atmosphere of pure panic as the team realized the certified clinical documents held by the grandfather were completely genuine. The leaked audio file completely dismantled the public stance of calm indifference that the Montecito estate had maintained for years. Listeners could hear top-tier advisors admitting that the official public birth timeline issued in 2021 possessed serious administrative gaps. The corporate managers discussed how a public courtroom disclosure of the hospital attendance logs would completely invalidate their previous media statements. The recording proved that the primary objective of their legal defense was not protecting the child's privacy, but shielding the corporate entity from a massive global credibility crisis. The narrative of an independent lifestyle empire built on absolute transparency was collapsing under the weight of their own recorded words. The economic impact of this audio leak hit the couple's entertainment partnerships immediately. Corporate board members at the major streaming networks convened emergency meetings to review the morals clauses in their multi-million-dollar production contracts. Independent auditors were appointed to investigate whether the brand's ongoing litigation was actively depressing subscriber engagement across North America. Major corporate sponsors, who had spent months preparing for the global launch of Meghan's new lifestyle products, quietly paused their marketing campaigns. They realized that any public promotion would be completely swallowed by a media storm centered on the California Superior Court dockets. The legal reality for Prince Harry had transformed into a state of total, unyielding isolation. He had successfully cut ties with his own family in London, believing he was stepping into a world of freedom, independent choice, and bulletproof privacy. Instead, he found his daughter's foundational medical documents being used as legal leverage in a raw, adversarial civil dispute driven by his wife's relatives. The sophisticated legal shields and high-priced attorneys had failed to stop the public paper trail from catching up with their curated Hollywood story. The serene dream of a peaceful exile in the hills of Santa Barbara had vanished, leaving the family trapped inside a legal fortress of their own making. The Markle family has officially opened a door that the Sussexes desperately wanted to keep locked forever. With legal demands flying and certified medical records entering the public court dockets, the narrative of a perfect California lifestyle is completely falling apart. What do you think Meghan will do next now that her family has forced this massive legal showdown? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and smash the like button so you never miss another unfiltered breakdown of the royal family. We will see you in the next video.